Welcome to the Bill Cartwright Show with our special guest, sports agent in Japan, entrepreneur, Todd Wiley. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Great to see you.
You know, we spent a lot of time in Japan and really got introduced over there. But
Right.
what we didn't get introduced to, really you and your life's journey. And I'm just really curious about that. So let's just start with this. Tell us about, I know where you're from. Tell us about where you're from. And I want to know about your mom and dad.
All right. Well, I'm from the bustling metropolis of Decatur, Illinois. I guess we're most famous for the Decatur Staleys turning into the Chicago Bears.
Nice.
Yep, grew up there. My mother is actually from Germany, and her father was in the German Kriegsmarine and didn't survive the war. So my grandmother remarried a U.S. serviceman, and my mother came to America when she was 14. Couldn't speak a lick of English. So that's her background. They kind of come from a slightly aristocratic German family. They had Mercedes-Benz dealerships in Germany and kind of that background before the war. She came to Decatur. That's where my step-granddad was from, and met my father in high school there. My father, on the other hand, was more of a farmer type. Their family was originally, I believe, from the Kentucky area, had been in Decatur for a couple of generations. Fortunately or unfortunately, my mother and father had 3 kids by the time they were 20, me being the middle child. So we grew up in a unique kind of atmosphere with my grandmother speaking broken English and German to us. And then my American side grandparents being very, salt of the earth kind of farmer types.
Tell us, what kind of kid were you in high school? Were you a sports kid? Were you an academic kid?
Definitely sports, but I did love to read. So I read everything I get my hands on. I still do, actually, whether it's in English or Japanese. That's actually been one of the impetuses for me being able to read Japanese. Is I just can't stand it when I'm on the train or something and I see a sign and I can't read it. And I actually have an app on my phone to, if there's like a character I don't understand, which will help me understand what's going on there. I did play baseball throughout high school. Wanted to play football, but my father was afraid of the injury started part of that, so he wouldn't let me play. Was very heavily into baseball, but also, like most Americans, into all 3 sports, basketball, baseball, and football. Obviously watched a lot of your games. Grew up a Bulls fan, Bears fan, Cubs fan. So
talk about after high school. What were your thoughts and where did you go?
yeah, so growing up, well, obviously my parents had a lot of pressure with 3 kids. By the age of 20, they divorced when I was about 8 or 9, I guess. And I have an older brother who went to the University of Illinois, and I wanted to also get some education, but there wasn't a lot of funding for that for me. So I kicked around a little bit in Decatur, did some odd jobs, and then I wound up joining the Air Force to get some opportunity. I also just felt like I really wanted to get away from the Midwest for a while and see another part of the world. So joining the Air Force was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. It allowed me to get that education. It allowed me to see the world. And it's really the reason that I wound up here in Japan.
How long were you in the Air Force? I did not know that.
Yeah, a little under 7 years. So I joined for 4, and then you can do a couple of extensions before you have to decide if you want to re-enlist. And I did actually love the Air Force and probably would have re-enlisted, but I was stationed in Hawaii and really falling in love with the Asian culture at that time. I'm a young single man in Hawaii. What's not to like? So
Exactly. That's not too shabby to be stationed in Hawaii.
right. But yeah, it
no,
looked like they were going to send me back to the Midwest for my next duty assignment. So that's when I decided to separate from the Air Force.
So you're separated from the Air Force.
Yep.
So now what are you thinking? You're out of the Air Force.
This is the miracle part. So I had a Japanese American girlfriend at the time. She was from Hawaii. And there was a lot of Japanese in Hawaii because of what they call the bubble economy in Japan, when their economy was just on fire. And there was Japanese people literally walking up to people's houses in Hawaii and knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I'll buy your house." That's how hot their economy was in those days. So I was infatuated, with how they got to that level of economic success. Just the whole culture, the people that I was seeing in Hawaii that were coming as tourists, the language definitely. And then, honestly speaking, as a man in my mid-20s, I thought those Japanese girls were kind of cute too. So, my girlfriend at the time got offered a position in Japan to be like a elementary school teacher. I don't know how to say it in English. I guess a cram school. She was offered a position with a cram school in Japan, and I went to her interview, and the Japanese guy that was interviewing said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm just getting out of the Air Force." And he said, "Do you want to be a high school teacher in Japan?" And I thought, well, yeah, I do. And I told him, "Look, I have no experience teaching." And he said, "We'll show you what to do." So on January 11th, 1991, I was an Air Force member, and January 13th, I was standing in a classroom in Japan in front of 20 Japanese high school students, not speaking a word of Japanese.
So how did that work? Did some of the young kids speak English, or how did you communicate?
Well, you got to remember, this is pre-internet. I got here in 1991. So, you couldn't go on your phone and get something translated for you. All Japanese have to study 6 years of English. And from your time in Japan, you know that there's some limited knowledge of English. They actually forced me to learn Japanese because they were definitely the ones taking care of me in the beginning. I couldn't speak any Japanese at all, maybe 2 words. But we really couldn't communicate. So I just put all my time into studying Japanese. I actually went out and bought a autobiography of Babe Ruth written in Japanese for junior high school kids. And I translated that by hand using the old fashioned way with a dictionary, because we didn't have the internet in those days. And it really, as it turns out, it really helped me to learn the language. But no, part of it was just gestures and smiling. We really couldn't communicate that much, but we figured it out. And I became close with all of those students. I still have letters that they wrote me, how much they enjoyed being in my class, and kind of cherished those memories of my first days in Japan.
So how long did it take for you to be fluent?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know that you ever get fluent in this language. I've actually been recently even to business meetings. And as you know, in Japan, everybody exchanges a business card when they meet each other. I've seen native Japanese speakers, 50 years old, meet each other and then ask each other how they read each other's name. It's that difficult of a language. I think if I would have studied Spanish and French and German for the 30 years I've been studying Japanese, I would have all those down. So to get comfortable speaking it probably took a couple of years. I was sitting in a sauna one day with a bunch of Japanese, and then I just realized, hey, I'm understanding what's going on here. So I would say that happened after about 2 years, but I still study to this day. There's 10,000 characters roughly, and several ways to read those characters. So, you got to keep studying and keep learning. But to get comfortable enough that I could feel like I knew what was going on a couple of years, and now to do business meetings and to write messages in Japanese, I continually try to improve that because it's a difficult language.
So your first job was a teacher. So talk about when you felt like you were ready to move on and do something different.
Well, I had a 2-year contract with that school, and I was getting a feel for the country and the language. And this is something that would be difficult for Americans to really relate to. But the first place I lived in was very Japanese. So there was no shower. It was a old style Japanese furo, or bath. And you cranked a little handle, and then that shot heat and gas, a gas burner up underneath this little cubicle. And then you had to stir this thing. So it took about an hour to take a bath. But none of that stuff bothered me. I was really getting into the culture and the language and the learning, and feeling like there was opportunity for me to do something. So after a couple of years of teaching, I went off and just did some, I went to a sports club and I taught there, but I also did like weightlifting classes. And at this time I'm still fairly young, probably about 30. and got more involved in day-to-day interactions with Japanese people, not just high school kids. And then I started looking around thinking, well, what could I do as a business? I always knew that I wanted to have my own business. I didn't know it would be in a foreign country in a different language. And I had done some vending kind of stuff when I was in the Air Force, just little, toys and things to make some extra money. And I knew that certain Japanese restaurants or shopping malls were into this kind of American retro look. So I opened up. At this time, again, Japan was different. It was harder to make a business. You had to have 30,000 US in capital to make a limited liability company, 100,000 to make a stockholder corporation. So I saved the 30,000 and I made the first company, which was a vending business. And I got those all over Japan and shopping malls, also the US military bases. And that was my first kind of foray into doing business in Japan and meeting, because it's not like America. It's much more formal, everything you do. It's proposals and, face-to-face meetings, and they're not as quick to say yes to something that, in America, you might say, hey, I think this idea make a couple bucks for you. Let's do this. It isn't like that. It takes a lot more personal relationships and getting to know people.
So how did you get involved with sports?
Okay, so the first company that I made was about 1995-ish. And I did that and was getting comfortable with, for this business, I traveled all over Japan and was getting comfortable with everything. And I never wanted to even get married or have a child. But as you know, life can sometimes throw some surprises at you. I wound up getting married and I wound up having a son. And I introduced him to all the sports, especially baseball, because that was my wheelhouse. Just to regress a little bit on the sports side, in Japan, as you saw when you were here, training can be a bit over the top. So I put him in baseball when he was about 6, and February, 25 degrees, icy rain, you practice 8 hours. So he got to a point where he finally said, I think I've had enough baseball, and he tried basketball, and he immediately fell in love with it. And he said, I know that I want to do this with my life. I want to play it, and then I want to be involved with it. And at that time, Japan had 8 professional teams. So they had a corporate league, which was run by Toyota and Kawasaki and Mitsubishi and Hitachi and the big corporations. So, as a dad, you think, well, what can I do to support my son or my child? And I thought, boy, it's really going to be hard for him to find a job when there's only 8 teams. So let me get involved with this a little bit, see if I can make some connections. And so I made a youth team for him. One, to avoid those kind of training things, because they do that for basketball too. They'll practice 8 or 10 hours a day, Saturday, Sunday, holidays. So I made a youth team on the military base with an active duty Navy guy. And then some of the professional players in that corporate league, the American players, heard about it. And they had kids here that were not comfortable, practicing on a Japanese team, and they couldn't understand anything. So they asked if they could join our team. I said, of course. So they joined the team, and then their dads and I got to be friends, and they would ask for favors, because I understood Japan and they didn't. Could you help me find this thing? Could you help me find this kind of restaurant? It grew a little bit, and I thought to myself, well, this is kind of turning into either a business opportunity or an actual business. So I established a sports company in 2004, I believe. And another part of success, I think, is just luck and timing. The Japanese basketball environment started to change. So they went from a corporate league to a breakaway league. In the corporate league, you could have 2 imports, one on the floor. And they made a new league with the unfortunate name BJ League, which allowed you to carry 4 imports and play up to 3 at a time. So there's more opportunities for players to come. So I started representing players and coaches and getting to know how this works and meeting people, meeting team owners. And at the same time, the Japan Basketball Association was having difficulty accepting the new league. So I just became a part of the whole basketball landscape, trying to make things work. Fast forward to the present, I got a partner, Deborah, who has an MBA and FIBA license, and her and I work together very, very well. She kind of handles the American side and working with other agencies, and then I handle everything in Japan. But our timing was great because FIBA forced all of these leagues together in Japan, and the basketball environment here has exploded. Even since you were here, Bill, it's literally 10 times as big. And so the new mandate for the league they want to make in 2026 is teams have to have 12 million in revenue, have a new arena with a minimum fan base of 4,000 fans. So to answer the original question, I got into it because of my son's love for basketball. And it's kind of exploded from there. He's going to be a senior in college, and hopefully, he's planning to come back and play professionally here starting next season.
And it's awesome. And my experience over there was really amazing. I had a great time, and you were a huge part of that. So thank you. So
well, thank you.
I am curious of that. Who was your first client, and talk about the difference in salaries from then when you started. Sure. And what it is.
Sure. You were close to one of the first clients actually that I worked with. But I believe it was probably Charles O'Bannon, because it was Chuck's son that really was looking for a place to play. He's, I think, also going to be a senior in college now in the U.S. I think he's at TCU. Probably Chuck was the first player I started working with. And then maybe you were the second client that I had in Japan. At that time, also, they didn't require you to actually have an agent's license. I was able just to get by on my network and my language skills. So, and my knowledge of, what Americans would need and want coming to Japan. And, when you were here, I tried to make sure you had the right food and the comfortable accommodations and make sure you were, so I was able to rely on those things. As the leagues got bigger and everything, you actually had to have a license. And that's when Deborah and I made our agency, and, she has all the licenses. So yeah, I would say the first clients were you and Chuck going back. Yeah.
So what's the difference in salaries now?
Yeah. So in those days, a player like Chuck would probably make a really good player like he was maybe 100,000. Top foreign players now are getting close to $1 million now. Definitely over $500,000.
Wow.
The top Japanese player last season probably made, the exchange rate between the yen and the dollar is going crazy right now. So it's tough to say in dollars, but over $1 million, between 1 and 1.3 million for the top Japanese player. So it's nothing like even when you were here, but definitely when I first got started, Japanese players might have been making a couple thousand a month. And now, average player can be making 100, 200, 300,000 a month or a season.
Wow. So, talk about this in a short fashion. What's the best thing about being in Japan, and what's the most challenging thing about being in Japan?
Man, the best thing after 31 years, it's hard to choose one because it may not be for everybody, but it fit what I was looking for. I love the challenge every day that I may not know something, or I love to learn something every day. So like I said earlier, whether it's learning a new character or just a new way of thinking, it was nice to raise my son here because of the safety. There's no real violence, and there's no real drug culture. So definitely that is appealing. The food, if you remember, is just fantastic. I just think the overall balance of life here is good. And so I would just have to say lifestyle, I guess, is the number one thing. The challenge, I won't ever forget that I'm a foreigner. I'm not Japanese. So, there's certain things that I may not fit into perfectly. And like I said earlier, I don't know if I'll ever get the language perfectly. Frankly, I don't know that I want to, because I don't know that it matches me as a foreigner, bowing deeply and doing certain things that really don't match who I am as a person or coming from America. So I would just have to say maybe sometimes I don't fit into certain situations. Might be the hardest thing about living here. But not many complaints, Bill. I like it.
No, I know, and I really agree with you about the food, the safety. I was really impressed that little kids could be on the train.
Sure.
By themselves.
Yeah.
There's just a really comfortable atmosphere and a real feel for people. They're gonna do the right thing.
Yeah.
Certainly don't have that here.
Well, I told my son this recently, and I know there's a lot of turmoil in the States right now and around the world. You can't let all of that drive you crazy, because I remember in the 70s, gas lines, and we all know the 40s with the rise of the Nazis and everything. There's always challenges and tough things in life. You have to obviously be aware of all of that, do what you can to make things better. But at the same time, you got to try to enjoy your day-to-day life, be the best person you can be as successful as you can be. So even though I see all that going on, and it's sad, I try not to let it dictate my day. I try to keep my thoughts positive and my outlook optimistic.
Yes. Yeah.
Going back, there's one thing I would like to mention about Japan that it's changing. Fortunately, that it affected you. Like I said earlier, the training schedule for kids with sports and even for education, it's just too much. So they have a culture in Asia to do things, to go overboard with sports and to train for sports. So we had those 10-hour days of practicing baseball in 25-degree weather. If you remember, when you came, a boy had killed himself.
Yes.
You remember that? Because of the pressure from his high school coach. And so that's definitely something that I don't agree with in Japanese culture or Asian culture, but fortunately that is changing.
Awesome. So being an entrepreneur, I know there's something you have in mind. So what's next?
Well, as you know, I've been working on a invention and for something for Starbucks. So I won't go into detail. I won't share it because it's not completely done yet.
Wow.
But yeah, I think I've shared that with you. I'm not sure if I have. If I haven't, I'll do that privately. But I've been working on this for about 8 years. I've spent a lot of money. I've went through a couple of different developers. I have a marketing team now in the US that's helping me with a marketing plan. Starbucks is our first point of entry that we hope to appeal to. But obviously we have some backup plans with other coffee chains and different people. So that's also on my plate right now. I've also been offered another contract on the U.S. military to do some other stuff, but turned 59 a couple weeks ago. So I think we might have to start choosing what we want to do and focus on one or two things. So I do have a couple of things in the pipeline as an entrepreneur. You can't stop. Sometimes I literally dreamed about the Starbucks idea. I literally had a dream about it.
Wow.
And then I called up my brother and said, hey, I thought of this, and he's an engineer and he helped me develop this. So you never stop as an entrepreneur, I think.
You talked about it a little bit. Talk about your family.
About what? My family?
Yeah.
Here in Japan or overseas?
In Japan.
Well, it's only me and my wife and son. And of course, I have a Japanese family through her. But, we were blessed to have a kid that we're crazy about. So our focus is still, making sure everything that is set up for him in his future. He's done great in college. He's been a 4-year starter in basketball. He's playing at Rhodes College in Memphis. It's been a great experience for him. We have a new house in Japan that if you come back, we'll have a barbecue in.
Nice.
Things overall great for the family, great for me. No complaints. Everybody's healthy. My Japanese family's healthy. Knock on wood, everybody's doing great. Her father owns a company that imports hay because, they don't have enough land in Japan to raise feed for the cattle, for the dairy farmers and whatnot. So he brings in hay from the US, Canada, Australia, and China. And she works for him, and his company is doing well despite the recent turbulence with the yen getting a little bit weaker. So knock on wood, everything's great. No complaints. Still very happy and still wearing the same size jeans as I wore in high school. So maybe that goes back to that good food in Japan.
Wow. Well, I'm doing that. I would like to be doing that, but I was a stick in high school.
You're also running up and down the court.
Yeah, no, I was a stick. So I was 7 foot tall. I was about 220 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I can't wear those, but my big dream is to get back to where I was as a player, and that's where I'm aiming. So
right.
I'll get there.
Well, like I said before we came on, you look great. I haven't seen you for a while. You can tell your work is working for you. So
yeah. I'm on this weird keto diet, so it's My wife doesn't like it, but I do. I gotta like it. It's somebody's got me in line and keeping me under control.
Well, if you remember that beef that Sato-san got for us with the Japanese
my
geisha, so we'll go back and get some of that if you make another trip to Japan.
Yes, and we're definitely going to have to do that. Mr. Sato-san, he was an easy man, and I really, really enjoyed spending my time there.
He loved having you. He's still, I think he's close to 90 now, but goes to every single game. Basketball crazy. The team is, doing well. They have a new coach this year, so they still think of you a lot. Believe me, they miss you.
Nice. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm so happy to be able to get you on, and hopefully very soon we can see each other in Japan.
I look forward to having you. Definitely will make it to the U.S. again soon as well, and hope to swing by and see you in person and enjoy some time together. Thanks so much for having me today, Bill.